Wilson, Mary Catherine Ham, Brian Neiman, today's newsmakers, and you. The Morning Majority, 630. WMAL.
8:37 on WMAL. Larry Kudlow joins us now, host of the Kudlow Report, CNBC, 7 o'clock in the evening, also on the call, 11 o'clock in the morning on CNBC. You can hear the Larry Kudlow Show here on WMAL, Saturday nights at 7 o'clock. Larry, we will spare you any questions about Anthony Weiner this morning.
Lucky you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I know, you feel better about that. ABC News, Washington Post has some polls out. Mary Catherine has these, I don't know if you've seen this or not, the statistics, these poll questions.
They just came out this morning, and it's pretty devastating on the economy. Overall, about 6 in 10, that's 60% for the math geniuses out there.
Thank you.
Of those surveyed, give Obama negative marks on the economy and the deficit. Two-thirds, 66% of political independents, important, disapprove of the president's handling of the economy, and a slim majority disapprove strongly, which is like as bad as it gets.
Yeah, that's more devastating to the president than Anthony Weiner's pictures, don't you think?
Yeah, I sure do. Excuse me. And also, this whole stall business, it's really, maybe it's based around this to some extent, but a lot of people thought we'd get 3-4% growth this year. Right now it's coming in less than 2%, and I don't really see it changing in the short run. I guess Bernanke is going to try to make the case that the second half of the year is going to be stronger. That's what the Fed is putting out. I'm not so sure. In fact, with oil prices so high and gasoline prices, I mean, maybe they peaked, maybe they haven't, but it's been a tax on the economy, and all this QE2 pump priming has probably done more harm than good, just as the original federal spending stimulus did more harm than good. So they're kind of up a tree right now.
Yeah, that's sort of my question, Larry, if you don't mind. I mean, we know the market is sputtering. Housing is in the toilet. Job growth is, at best, you could call it anemic, if almost non-existent. The economy does seem to be slowing down, and yet QE2 is winding down. I'm not sure it made any difference anyway, but it's winding down. What quivers do they have in their what arrows do they have in their quiver to sort of solve the economy and get it juiced and moving again?
Well, what the administration should do, which they will not, but they should move to the supply side. They should go for tax rate relief.
What a novel concept.
Yeah, well, look, it's about as novel as pumping up the money supply and pumping up federal spending and borrowing. Why don't they go back to what Ronald Reagan successfully did with the last bad recession, where the recovery was over 7% growth? I mean, right now, a business tax cut is exactly what is necessary. Take that top rate from 35 to 15%. They ought to reform the tax code for personal individuals, go to a flatter tax cut. I'm a flat tax guy. What about all the regulatory costs? There's, war is being waged against Boeing. War is being waged against energy producers. War is being waged against business. Pull back the EPA, things of that sort. And by the way, change Federal Reserve policy. Instead of pump priming, why not stabilize the value of the dollar? Why not relink the dollar to gold? In other words, there's a whole bunch of things to create new incentives that would put some animal spirits and torque into this economy. Businesses have money, they're not spending it. Small businesses don't have money, and they're very worried about the uncertainty of major tax and regulatory increases. These may be cliches. Let me add Obamacare, which itself is a payroll tax hike, massive regulatory costs. People on the left say, oh, there they go again. Well, yeah, that's the stuff that worked. I mean, we've had 2.5 years of Federal and Federal Reserve, budget and Federal Reserve pump priming, and it hasn't worked.
And yet, do you see any sign?
Something different?
Do you see any sign that they might be willing to consider any of those things that are known to have worked in the past?
Well, the president gives lip service every now and then. He talks about tax reform, but there's always something that gets in the way. He talks about free trade, or these trade agreements with Korea and Panama and Colombia. But there's always something that stops it out. My friend Freddie Barnes wrote this about how now it's trade adjustment assistance, a.k.a. union assistance. He talks about this stuff, and even I have been lured into it from time to time, saying, oh, my God, he's a centrist. He finally got the message of the economy and the election last November. And then about a month or two later, I sit down at night and I screw up my lips and said, why did you fall for that? It never happens. There you go again, Larry. You fell for it. Hook, line, and sinker. I mean, he gives lip service, but nothing ever happens. So I don't know.
Now, the answer to my question is no. and the reason is because Democrats believe in redistribution of wealth.
Yes, they do. And they believe in big government approaches. And I'm profoundly a free market guy, and I'm a supply side guy. So, yeah, you're right, Brian. That all that is correct. Look, I don't want to be too gloomy. We're not going into a double-dip recession. I don't see that. Profits are still pretty good. But this is a kind of slumpy period, a sputtering period. And so when Mary Catherine reads those polls, I'm not surprised.
Yeah, well, there's another poll, too, from companies. 30% of companies say they plan to essentially drop health care coverage for their employees once the Affordable Health Care Act, or Obamacare for another name.
They're going to put it in the public pool.
Yeah.
It's going to cost a fortune and cause major cost overruns. I mean, we were debating this on the Kudlow Report last night. You've got these wonderful new advances in cancer drugs, these miracle drugs developing. Mm-hmm. And then the big question is, will the government regulators allow them to come to market, and then how will we pay for them? And will there be enough free choice in the system? Will there be enough choice and opportunity in the system to take advantage of these great innovations? I mean, unfortunately, this White House is not a private sector. You know, they may have lip service, but they basically believe that government has to steer the ship and plan the ship of the economy, and that's the whole problem. And I just want to add, I don't want to let the Fed, Bernanke and Company off the hook, because I believe QE2, which has depreciated the dollar and driven up energy and food prices and overall inflation, I think on balance it's done more harm than good. You know, if it were that easy that you could just create money out of thin air, or if it were that easy that you could just spend yourself into oblivion and transfer money from the private sector into the government sector and transfer it into government unions and so forth, if it were that easy, it would have worked after 2.5 years. But the answer is it doesn't work because it's fatally flawed programs. That's what the problem is, and you need a whole new approach. And presumably, that's what this presidential campaign election is all about.
We'll see. Thank you, Larry, for coming on the show. As always, we appreciate it.
All right, thank you.
Larry Kudlow, host of the Kudlow Report. Check him out at 7 o'clock tonight on CNBC.